Okay, Dane Rose here for week 45 of our year of accelerated growth and well-being. Yes. Thank you for all of you joining me from week number 1. This year is intended to be watched in sequence, in order. And this is deliberately towards the end, meaning that one is going to get significantly more value in this week after going through the journey. Now, this week's topic, week 45, is psychedelics. And it's a very potent week. So if you think of psychedelics as an accelerator, as gasoline, you know that it takes very little in a well-designed engine to take us a long way. And you also know it can blow up in your face. You can burn alive with gasoline. You can start a raging fire with gasoline. You can create a bomb with gasoline. You can burn someone else alive with gasoline. And you can fuel a very efficient car. You can accelerate very quickly with more gasoline. It's a neutral substance in some ways, so it's all about a number of things which I want to talk about. So first of all, earlier on in the year, I talked about trauma and PTSD. I highly recommend taking the Adverse Childhood Experience Test, the ACE study, knowing your score. If it's 2 or more, I highly recommend the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I also recommend the very quick HSP test to see if you're in the 10% of the population that is highly sensitive. If you are microdosing and getting aware of how a typical dose affects your body before bringing it up to a normal level is incredibly important. I also recommend the book Food for the Gods by Terence McKenna, and I recommend watching online. It's a good idea to, I think, invest a minimum of 20 hours and better 200 hours in research. So there's all kinds of YouTube videos. I have a channel called Psychedelic Safety because I thought I was doing a pretty good job by, I hired a therapist who it turns out wasn't licensed. I read Food for the Gods. I read Acid Test. I started with a smaller dose. And because my therapist wasn't grounded in good therapeutic ethics, I actually fell in love with, my practitioner recommended a high dose of psilocybin plus MDMA, and then he was attracted to me, and MDMA is a judgment inhibitor and an open heart, an opener. And so it created this entangled mess that had serious ripple effects for a number of years on health and money and various things. And so I looked at all of the things that could go wrong, many of which did in that process, and outlined them in the channel on psychedelic safety. And I mention this because it's an accelerator. It's like sex in this way. Sex is an accelerator. If you have a fucked up relationship and you have sex, it will just speed up everything coming to a head in one way or another. If you have a painful relationship, it will intensify the proximity and lead to more pain. If you have a good relationship, it will catapult you into deeper states of love and well-being. So it's all about getting pointed in the right direction before you hit the jetpack. When you're shooting off at an accelerated pace, aiming carefully to know where you're going to land is pivotal. So why psychedelics with all those risks? Precisely because it is a neutral compound. Now, when I say neutral compound, I just mean it can be used like jet fuel, like gasoline, to go in the right direction very fast. And it can be used like jet fuel, like gas, to go in the wrong direction very fast. It's therefore much better. There's a business book that I quite like called Nail It, Then Scale It. It's a wonderful book. But the advice is, do not start a company, do not launch into a project full bore as your first thing. Instead, refine, grow. Maybe if you're start something more as a sole proprietorship, do an incremental small thing, evaluate the feedback, etc., and then when it's perfected, scale it, make it a lot bigger, replicate the pattern. McDonald's worked very hard to get the recipe just right before rolling it out, and there's an important learning curve in that process. So goals and all of this journey throughout this year is helping you reach that point where an acceleration of speed is going to take you in a good direction rather than in a bad direction. So leading world experts, incredibly successful and driven entrepreneurs, highly accomplished intellectuals, etc. These are people that often benefit most because they're able to participate in a conscious surrender, understanding what's happening, seizing the opportunity. And it tends to be people who have done no work at all on themselves that get very little out of it, because it's not there's nowhere to there's no seed to accelerate. You've got to provide that and the pattern, and this will speed that up. That being said, it is more than just a neutral accelerator. Psychedelics have a very important function of dissolving boundaries, of dissolving frameworks of thought. Now, why is this so important? Is we are injected and molded into a cultural mode that is very much like a fish in water. So it's very hard to see what is the culture and what is us when we've been in a culture since birth. This is very, very deep. What psychedelics at higher levels tend to do is they tend to give us an experience of who we are as potential before all that programming and boxing occurs. Now, why is this important? Because it gives more flexibility, more creativity, more choice. There have been 10,000 cultures in human history, and each of those cultures have interpreted the human potential and taken it in a different direction, often not better or worse, but emphasizing one thing more than another. So a tribal dance that can dance in ecstasy all night as a group in a cohesive order is bringing about a certain ecstatic ritual that our culture may know nothing about, that we may never experience in our culture. And we lose that in the passion for modernity. Similarly, many tribal cultures, etc., do not know depression. Do not know, in the Thoe tribe in Brazil, they do not know spousal abuse. They have no police force. They know no violence. It is incredibly attuned ecology, a very sensuous, people who, from childhood to adult, and we get to see what that's like. We get to have more options, and the dissolving of thought structures exposes us to that field of possibility, which is very, very exciting, to get to know who all the parts of us that we could be. The very same process makes it very important that we understand trauma deeply. We're a very deeply traumatized culture, from the founding with the massacre of the Indians to our Civil War, to our slavery, to our racial attack, to the fact that 1 in 3 domestic households in America experience physical domestic violence. We are a very traumatized culture, much more so than many of the tribes in our history. And so in that context, if we don't understand the reservoirs of partitioned pain and overwhelm that are stored in the body by our culture helps us create pain and then numb it and then dissociate from that pain. Now, that also dissolves, and the pain that has been dissociated comes back to be felt, to be processed, which means if you don't understand what's going on, if you don't understand trauma, you can be in for a deluge of 10, 20, 30 years of repressed pain, rushing through without the partitions there to hold it back. Now, this is very good if you know what you're doing, if you're welcoming that and you're expecting it, because you can clear that out of your system and out of your space. It may take you a year, it may take you a month, it may take you a few days, but this is very important work. But it is absolutely terrifying. Some people commit suicide, etc., if it's coming unexpected, out of their control, and they don't have the mental paradigm to understand what's going on. And so, because in a culture that is so effective at denying and suppressing pain, many of us don't know that it's there. So this is the caveat that I would put in place. That being said, particularly with things like psilocybin mushrooms or ayahuasca, where it's been a medicinal energy through time, these energies are our friends. They're bringing us back into integrity with ourselves. They're integrating us with ourselves and sidestepping the culture. They're giving us hours at a time of being outside of the cultural framework and thus able to do some really deep healing work and integrating work. Simultaneously, they can do so many things like reduce fear of death, help us understand things that we know on some level but don't know on another level. So they are very deep accelerators. And so what's important is the focus and the intention of the work, learning about the substance, taking time to get a sense of the possible experiences and different ways to work with it. I mean, it's, if you listen to Terence McKenna, one of my favorites, he'll talk about what to do if your trip grinds to a halt, that breathing deeply can help, or, and this is specifically talking with psilocybin mushrooms, or that sometimes, smoking a joint, if things are getting very stick, has helped him through. You want to get a sense of the landscape. You want to get a sense, like, over here there can be a really deep muddy rut, and here's how you get through it if that comes up for you. You do not want to be in unknown terrain, particularly in a paranoid framework where our government, unlike so many of the leadership bodies before us for the last 1,000 years, is actually at war with people going on these transcendent journeys. You don't want to be in that situation where it's, you're paranoid and it's hard to call for help. You haven't learned the terrain. and you're not able to take care of yourself. So learn, get to know the substances, weigh them, just get a simple digital scale on Amazon, $29. Weigh them, work with natural substances, like psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca. You may wish to, go down to Peru where you don't have to deal with the legal issues. Become familiar with the terrain, and again, learn, grow. Pain comes up, learn and grow. Joy comes up, learn and grow. The real power is in integration. So if, it's not something that, in the Eleusinian mysteries in some thousands of years ago, it was something done for 9 days, just once in a person's life in many cases. This is not a high repeat, recreational thing as much as a profound rift, opening the doorway that lets light come in, where we've been barricaded behind the cultural wall, thinking this is us, when really this is this expression of us that has been framed in this way and nurtured and shamed and blocked in this way by this culture. And to see who we are outside of that framework is almost always so much more beautiful, so much more transcendent than seeing who we are in this, in this body, in this culture, etc. Seeing that, the big challenge is to bring the two together, not to escape, but to embrace the opportunity. In the current debates around the probability fields of this reality being a simulation, back in Plato's time, in some of these experiences, this was Plato's hypothesis, that this is a shadow of a more real world, that this is a simulation, in a sense, a deep virtual reality. But the whole point of being in a simulation, when you put on the goggles and you put on the headset and you sign up for the game and you press play, is once you're in, you don't just say, oh, I don't like all these monsters running around, I'm going to take off the goggles and escape. If you're putting on the goggles to play, it's to build stamina. It's to learn to be good at this particular game. It's to learn something. And you want to leave the game with a high score. You want to practice. It's not fair. It's meant to be a challenge. That's the point of the game. Most people don't put on video games and just say press go and you've won $10 million and that's the end of the game. It's boring. You make all kinds of levels, and when you get to this level, then you can go to this level, then you can go to this level, and that's what makes it fun, is these challenges and infinite levels. And then we come into this simulation, and it's like, well, that's not fair. Why is that so hard? It's hard for the challenge of playing. We've just, some of the virtual reality, experiences are so profound. You get lost. You forget it's a game. You forget it's a game. And so this is one of the great transcendent experiences in life. Sexuality, profound meditation, psychedelics. And in most of the stories, that I hear with the people that have really gone somewhere beautiful, this is a period of 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. And then from that point, it's about integrating that experience, and really going into a deep journey to take all that's, learned and opened and bring it into this world. It's kind of like taking the goggles off a little bit and realizing that we're so much more than this, virtual reality here. But when we remember that, one of it's to remember in a certain way that it's a gift, it's a game, and to therefore make the most of it, to really play it for all it's worth, to give as much as you can give, to love as deeply as you can love, to risk, to practice and fall down and risk and make it. And it's an exciting journey that can be extraordinarily painful. It can be extraordinarily beautiful. It can be both. Pain and beauty can both be our teachers. If you take this step and do the work and notice something profound and want to share it, I'd love to hear it. And thank you for watching.